Hello friends, this is Odds, it will be official soon, and today we're going to talk about the massive roster of killers in Dead by Daylight. There are killers that are free that you unlock right away when you purchase the game. Some of them you can unlock with time or money, and some of them that are licensed you have to pay money for. And choosing which one is right for you obviously requires the aforementioned time and money, and it can be very difficult. Beginners don't know where to start, and people that have been playing the game for a long time sometimes don't know which killer to settle for so that they can keep having fun. This video should help you to do just that, and for that reason we're going to break down these killers into multiple categories and go into detail into what makes them different and similar. But if you don't have time for all of that, I actually have a tool that is really helpful, which I've named Which Killer. You can find it at otzdarva.com/whichkiller. If you open this link, you can find it in the description, you will find a trivia quiz style thing that after answering a few questions based on your needs, it will provide a list of which killers are best for your particular playstyle. And we actually keep this updated every time there's a new killer or a big update. And there's also another thing we have at otzdarva.com/spreadsheet that has information on all of the killers, all of the perks that can be helpful to make your own mine at your own pace. But if all of that sounds intimidating, don't worry, we're gonna jump into the killers now and explain all of them. Okay, so let's say that you are starting out and you need to pick your first killer to get in contact with the game, understand how to play killer. The game does come with a difficulty rating, but this, even though it's somewhat accurate, doesn't tell you a lot about what you should be doing. I think the easiest way to understand how killers work is to classify them on 3 different categories. The first ones are the basic killers, sometimes referred to as M1 killers. These killers have the same speed, the same lunge, the same terror radius for the most part, and they all play roughly the same. This gives you the most baseline vanilla killer experience, and starting with these killers is a pretty good idea. We then move on to the hybrid killers. These killers have some characteristics of the basic killers, but they also have powers that are complex, that change their speed or require them to move or traverse the map in different ways. You can start with these killers, but they're a little bit more complex. So I would recommend that in general, you play these later, because they're easier to pick up once you learn the basics. And then we have a few killers that are very unique. These killers do not move and chase in normal ways. In fact, some of them, especially Nurse, Hag, and Spirit, move in very unusual ways that are completely different from normal M1 basic style killers. These killers you can go for, but I don't recommend you start with them, because if you learn these killers, you will only learn that individual killer and you won't actually learn the basics that are important to grasp as a killer. So it would be very difficult to learn one of these killers and then switch to anything else. But back to the basic killers. There are a few that I think stand out as obvious picks for a beginner that have a little bit of everything to start out. The 2, in my opinion, that stick out the most are the Wraith, which is a free killer, and Legion, who is a DLC killer that can be bought with time, in-game currency, or real currency if you want to make the investment. These 2 killers are great for beginners. They are basic killers that are very easy to pick up, have very simple powers that are very easy to understand. The Wraith does come with very bad perks, unfortunately. He doesn't unlock any great perks, but everything else about him is great. He's very fast when he cloaks, which lets you traverse the map quickly in whatever map you find yourself in. He's also very stealthy, which makes it very easy to understand where survivors typically move and learn their patterns and catch them off guard. Yeah, he's a very simple killer to start with, and particularly great if you've already unlocked a few good perks. Legion, on the other hand, is not stealthy at all. He actually has a power that allows him to injure multiple survivors very easily. It's very fast-paced, but at the same time easy to pick up, and I highly recommend him. Once everyone is injured, now you have to play a bit more normally, and getting the downs is a bit tricky, but against beginners, it's a perfectly good killer to start with, and he does come with 1 perk named Discordance that is absolutely amazing to have unlocked. So these are the killers I would recommend, with the other ones also being worthy mentions. If you want to go for one of the hybrid or more unique killers later, that is also okay, but I do recommend against it as one of your first experiences, because it might make the game harder than it needs to be. Another very important thing, once you've already picked a killer or two that you're comfortable with, is getting good teachables. Teachables are the perks that you can unlock from one killer to the rest. Each killer comes with 3 perks that once you prestige them become available to everyone. So as you can imagine, it's very, very important to pick killers that will help you have good perks unlocked on everyone. Let's get into them. And right off the bat, when it comes to teachables, I would highly recommend that you stay away from these characters if that's what you're looking for. These characters don't have very great perks. Wraith has no good ones. Pyramid Head doesn't have any good ones. The Demogorgon actually has no perks whatsoever because he's a discontinued DLC. And then Freddy, Huntress, and Oni maybe have one perk that is worth going for, but otherwise are pretty bad. Instead, you want to set your sights on slowdown perks that will slow down survivors so you have more time to kill them. And these killers bring some of the best ones in the game right now. And they all have different styles. The most universally useful perks to help you slow down the games are the ones that are passive. And some of the best ones include the Cenobite's Deadlock, which comes also with Gift of Pain. Gift of Pain slows down gens and healing a little bit, and Deadlock is the king of slowdown in the current patch. Anytime survivors complete one gen, the other gen that has the most progress will be locked for 30 seconds automatically without you doing anything. And this is a perk that you can slap on almost any killer, on almost any build, and it's really, really, really good. Another perk that is extremely useful and very easy to use is Corrupt Intervention from the Plague. This perk blocks the 3 furthest generators far away from you without you having to do anything, which gives you tons of time to go find someone, get it down before the perk deactivates, and not so many gens get immediately touched at the start. Very, very useful, very easy to use. No Way Out is more of an endgame perk, but it's also very, very useful. If you get a few hooks by the end of the game, survivors will now be slowed down very dramatically when they try to open the gates. And if you play it right, this can give you extra kills all the time. Goes also very well with Noed. So these are maybe the 3 perks that are easiest to unlock and immediately use as slowdown. But there are some other ones that also have their own style. Pain Resonance from the Artist, for example, is a very simple perk to use. It will create a white hook that you can hook people on, and the most advanced gen will now explode. And it's a really easy to use perk, very powerful on many killers. And it also pairs really well with Deadman's Switch from the Deathslinger, which will block generators that are left by survivors. And Pain Resonance makes the survivors go away when it triggers, so it can be really useful. Deadman's Switch also works really well with killers that can harass generators from a distance, such as Doctor or Artist herself, so it's a nice perk to consider. And I have thunder in the background, don't mind that. We also then move on to the perks that work when you kick generators. And for example, we have Sadako, who has some of the best ones. Cal O'Brien is amazing. When you kick a generator, that gen will regress and go back twice as fast, and it stacks really nicely with other kicking gen perks such as Pop from Clown, Overcharge from Doctor, which is pretty decent against beginners, Eruption on Nemesis, which will make the gen lose progress and make people useless for a little bit if they were working on it. And it just so happens that Sadako comes with Merciless Storm, which gives a lot of difficult skill checks at the end of a generator and blocks itself if they fail them. Against beginners, this perk is great, and against advanced players, it doesn't go so well, but it can be combined with other perks to still make it good. So these are some of the better perks that you can go for. Ruin on Hag is not as strong as it used to be, but it's also a passive perk that slows down gens anytime people are not touching them, which is still really useful, and Hag does come with some other decent perks. I would say, if you're playing a killer that can have mobility and get to gens fast, such as Freddy, such as Sadako, the kicking gen perks are worth it. If you're a killer that has to set up a bit more and doesn't have time to kick things such as Hag or Trapper, you might actually enjoy running some of the more passive perks instead. Either way, pick 1 or 2 of these perks to go for that have good synergy with each other, that have good synergy with your killer and your playstyle. And once you introduce these perks to your build, you will do a lot better. But these perks don't work so well without information. That's why I highly, highly recommend that you also set your sights on at least 1 gen tracking gen info perk. And these are some of the best ones in the game right now. If you're playing a killer that benefits from finding groups of survivors such as Legion, Discordance is an amazing perk to go for. It will tell you where 2 or maybe 3 or all 4 survivors are, which is great. If you have perks to make gens regress automatically or very, very easily. Pain Resonance, Ruin, Jolt, then Surveillance from the pick is a really good pick. It will make you hear gens from further, which is useful, and also tell you by colors which gens are going back and which gens have been touched by survivors. If you're playing a killer that doesn't have any stealth and you'd like to sneak up on gens and know when they're being done, Tinkerer, as I said from the Hillbilly, is an amazing perk that allows you to not only know when a gen is getting done, but also become stealthy and get there and maybe get an insta down, who knows. Barbecue and Chili allows you to see people from afar, which is really good for killers that can snipe, such as Artis, or quickly move around the map, such as Nurse and Blight, and it's a very useful perk for catching people in the open. Trillion Tremors blocks the gens that are not being worked on, so it's a very reliable perk to know which gens are currently being touched. And you can also even use it sometimes to stall the game. So if I was playing Freddy or some killer that can teleport and I had gen kicking perks and I wanted to know where to deliver them, Trillion Tremors is an amazing pick. And after all of that, you also have Lethal Pursuer from Nemesis. Lethal Pursuer doesn't exactly tell you which gens are getting done throughout the game, but it does tell you where everyone starts out. And that is great, because if you find a group of 3 survivors, you can immediately go there, harass them, and that's no gens being done for a little while. And after you get that down or 2, you still have a decent idea of where the team is and where they're going to move. And it also improves every other reading, outer reading perk and add-on in the game. So Lethal Pursuer can also fill this role quite nicely. So now you have some Slowdown, you have some information. What else do you need in the build? And the answer sometimes is utility. There are several perks that are easy to get and relatively useful for certain builds that I would highly recommend, and these are some of the best ones. If you're playing a stealth killer, having Nurse's Calling from Nurse is an amazing perk. Anytime a survivor is healing around you, you will see them and be able to sneak up on them. So if you play a stealth killer, highly recommend you unlock Nurse's Calling from the Nurse. If you play a killer that has to hit survivors with their basic attack and then catch up and then hit them again, if you don't insta down or play a killer that uses their power to down, Save the Best for Last from Michael, the Shape, is an amazing pick. Say you play Trapper, say you play Pig, say you play Demogorgon, something like Doctor. It is an amazing perk to unlock on killers that have to clown, for example, on killers that have to hit you with their basic attack and then hit you again. So I highly recommend you go for that in that case. If you're gonna play a killer that has a Chainsaw, the Hillbilly, or the Cannibal, Bamboozle from the Clown is an amazing pick, and he also comes with Pop. So I highly recommend you level him up. Bamboozle will let you block windows that you vault, and it helps a lot on killers that are very aggressive and insta down. Myers, who benefits from it especially, and the 2 Chainsaw Bros come to mind, but a few other killers can also use it. If you're gonna go for hexes, Hex Ruin, Hex Devour Hope, and so on, you really want to pick up the Blight at some point. He comes with an amazing hex called Blood Favor, which blocks pallets around you when you hit and injure survivors. And more importantly, he comes with Undying. Undying is basically a get down Mr. President insurance hex. So if you have Hex Ruin and Undying, Undying will always be the one to be cleansed. So Undying is basically a second layer of protection that makes hexes harder to cleanse. And it goes really well with things like Pentimento from the Artist, who is also a nice perk to have if you have many hexes. If survivors break a hex in any way, Pentimento allows you to revive the hex with some really nasty slowdown. And it's a nice perk to go for, since Artis has also some other nice perks. If you're gonna go for hexes, Artis is worth picking up. Another killer that is worth picking up for No Way Out and for his other 2 perks is the Trickster. The Trickster comes with Starstruck, which makes everyone around you when you pick up a survivor insta-downable, and Crowd Control, which blocks windows that are fast vaulted by survivors. Crowd Control is a nice chasing perk that goes well on several killers, and Starstruck makes it so that survivors will never be able to take hits or body block when you're trying to get someone to a hook, and is particularly nasty on killers like Nurse and Deathslinger that use their basic attacks. So with these perks in mind, you should have a pretty comprehensive idea of what Teachables are worth going for right now. But let's say that you've already picked a killer to start, a few killers to unlock Teachables. How exactly do you pick now a killer that fits your style? Practice makes perfect. You will eventually figure it out after trying all the killers, but I'll still give you a little bit of information so you have a rough idea. Four killers stand out as being stealth killers. This includes the Wraith, who is invisible, moves around the map very fast. The Shape, Myers, who starts out stealthy and has a bit of stealth, but then becomes a loud, powerful insta-down killer. The Pig has arguably the weakest stealth, but on top of that, she has other abilities that allow her to use an ambush in chase and also slow down survivors, so she's a bit of a jack of all trades. Ghostface is a really strong stealth killer, a little bit hard to use than Wraith, but still quite satisfying if you learn him. And then Sadako has great mobility, and even though she doesn't have a lot of tools in chase, she can be quite oppressive if you play her right and very confusing for new players. So these are the stealth killers of the group. Maybe one of them tickles your fancy. We then have the setup killers, which is definitely Hag and partially Trapper. Trapper can set up traps on the ground, bear traps that can catch Survivor, and even though he starts out simple to play, he gets harder as survivors get smarter, but he can be very satisfying to learn where to place these traps and catch survivors in them. Hag is a lot stronger because she can place traps that she can then teleport to and hit you right away, and a good Hag that sets up is a bit of a chess player. They are slow at the start, they develop their pieces, and then later they just choke you with their options, with no options for you to get out because of just how present they are on the board. So if that's your style, give them a try. After that, we move on to the killers that are mostly chased focused. These killers don't have a lot of mechanics to build up or prepare. They're just living in the here and now. They have a power, sometimes strong, sometimes very strong, to chase whoever is in front of them. You have the Chainsaw Bros, the Hillbilly and Cannibal, who have chainsaws to instant-down survivors. The Hillbilly has a bit more mobility, which allows him to traverse the map quickly, which the Cannibal doesn't have, but the Cannibal can hit multiple times and down multiple survivors, which makes him very, very scary from up close. The Nurse has a very unique power that allows her to teleport, and this basically makes her one of the strongest, if not the strongest killer in the game, but she's very unique. We then have Huntress, Deathslinger, and Trickster, all of whom are range killer. The Huntress throws hatchets that injure survivors if they are hit. The Trickster throws multiple knives really quick, which also build up and injure, and they play somewhat similarly. And the Deathslinger actually shoots out a harpoon that he reels towards you and hits you. All of them are pretty fun, a little bit unique. We then have the Clown, who throws gas bottles to speed himself up and slow down survivors. Fairly simple, but difficult to master, pretty fun to pick up. Legion, who uses his power to massively injure survivors and keep them injured and slow them down, but then after that he is a basic killer. And then we have the Spirit. The Spirit is a very unique killer. She will use her power to move extremely fast and become invisible, but while using the power she also becomes blind. She doesn't see survivors, so she has to guess by sound and cues. Difficult to play, but also very oppressive if done correctly. The Blight plays like a normal killer, but his power also allows him to run very fast and bump into objects. He's a bit of like a pinball ball bouncing around the map, and he's one of the strongest killers in the game if you learn to play him right. And then we have an assortment of killers that have a combination of playing normally, but also using different powers and multiple abilities together. Doctor has a very complex ability that allows you to make survivors come out of hiding, build up madness to a very significant amount of different effects when their madness builds up. Plague infects items and survivors and eventually makes them unable to heal, and then she has a second mold where she becomes really powerful and can puke over obstacles and damage people. Nemesis spawns 2 zombies that help him in the map and has a complex tentacle that allows him to hit survivors over obstacles, as well as break breakable walls and pallets really fast. The Twins are actually a pair of killers that can split up. And while Charlotte is a normal killer, Victor, the smaller twin, can actually jump over obstacles and damage survivors in very creative ways. Freddy has different abilities that allow him to teleport and either place down slowdown snares or fake pallets to mess with survivors. It's kind of fun. The Pig has some stealth, some ambush chase ability, as well as a natural built-in slowdown that survivors have to play around or else they can die to it. Pretty fun. Demogorgon's abilities allow him to teleport around the map and use his shred to break pallets and injure survivors. Pretty fun, all-around balanced killer. Dione is a normal killer until he gathers enough blood, and then he becomes a demon with a huge cannibal that allows him to insta-down and break things really fast. Then we have the Executioner. who can use his power to hit through any loop in the game pretty much, which makes him very, very dangerous from up close. And he also has a different way to hook survivors to completely outplay a bunch of survivor perks. High skill, but also high reward. The artist is also very high skill ceiling. She sends out birds into the map that can injure survivors from afar if she does it right, or even injure them from up close right away, which makes her very oppressive and present all around the map at times. And then we have the Cenobite, who spawns a box that survivors have to find, or else they get harassed by a bunch of chains. He can also use these chains himself in chase to slow down survivors and hit them, with a lot of complexity going around them. So with all of that, you should have a decent idea of which killers to go for. Now, many people want to know which killers are strongest and which ones are weakest, and I'm gonna tell you right now, the strongest killers in the game are easily the Nurse, the Spirit, and Blight. These are the so-called S tier killers, highly agreed on. We then have killers that are not quite as strong, not quite as consistent, but also very, very, very powerful, especially if you really master them. Killers that are more on the average side, who are definitely a power to be reckoned if you play them right. And then the killers that are generally considered to be slightly below average, but even these killers do really well. I don't want you to make a choice based on the strength, because as I said, even these killers are really, really good still, and it would be a shame for you to just pick the strongest killer. There's enough of those. So hopefully with this information and the spreadsheet and which killer trivia, you have enough information to make your own mind, and I would love to hear what you have to say and what you have to do after receiving all of this. Really, please do tell me which killer you pick, why, because it will help me understand how people play this game. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.